There was a scream, a splash, and then silence, except for the frogs croaking like nature's own laugh track as Karen's $12,000 camel-wrapped ATV slowly sank beneath the lily pads in my backyard pond. One moment she was airborne, blonde hair flying like a shampoo commercial, collided with a nature documentary. The next, she was neck-deep in koi water and regret. I didn't move. I just stood there on my porch with a fresh cup of coffee, blinking like my brain was buffering. What I just witnessed couldn't possibly be real. But then, her head bobbed to the surface, hair matted with algae, eyes wide with betrayal, as if I had somehow launched her into the drink. "You're gonna pay for this," she screeched, flinging pond scum at the sky like it owed her money. And that, ridiculous as it sounds, was the exact moment I knew I'd be in court within a week. Let's rewind. 6 months before Karen made her aquatic debut, our little rural neighborhood had been a slice of peace. I'd been here 15 years. My backyard was my sanctuary. Lush trees, a handmade footpath, and a koi pond I built stone by stone, day by day. That pond wasn't just a water feature, it was therapy. It was mine. And then came Karen. She moved in with the subtlety of a marching band and the grace of a wrecking ball. Her ATV, wrapped in camouflage vinyl and fitted with chrome wheels, roared louder than a jet ski in a bathtub. She wasn't just loud, she was aggressively entitled. She treated the quiet trail behind our homes like it was a racetrack built for royalty. The same trail I'd quietly maintained for years, used only for walking my dog and watering the pond. But the day Karen laid eyes on it, something shifted. She decided it was hers. Every attempt I made to explain, to request, to reason, was met with eye rolls and mockery. One time she pointed at the pond and said, "I didn't pay property tax to stare at your fish." She wasn't just stomping on my lawn, she was chewing it up with 500 cc's of attitude. After one too many high-speed passes near my garden gnome, I decided to make it official. I installed wooden signs, private property, keep off trail. I painted them bright yellow. I even added reflective paint and solar lights, hoping subtlety would be backed by visibility. Karen's response? She ripped one of the signs down, snapped it over her knee, and left it on my porch like a turf war trophy. I would have laughed if it hadn't made me seriously consider buying a moat. And then, of course, the HOA did what the HOA does. Absolutely nothing. Why? Because Karen's cousin Mitch had just been elected HOA vice president. And apparently that came with immunity from common decency. Karen laughed, Mitch shrugged, and I started prepping like a man going to battle, with paperwork, not pitchforks, trail cameras, permit documents, a trip to the county office. I wasn't planning revenge, I was planning proof. Saturday came wrapped in birdsong and sunshine. I stepped out with my coffee, hoping for a quiet morning, but the second I heard the high-pitched rev of that ATV engine, my stomach sank. This time, it wasn't just Karen. She'd assembled her yoga posse, 6 women in pastel activewear standing at the edge of her property, sipping smoothies and giggling like teenagers at a pep rally. Karen, decked out in a pink athletic suit and sunglasses that could pick up satellite, revved her engine and shouted, "Watch this, ladies, redneck rally time." I didn't even get to put down my mug. She pointed her machine straight at the footpath, my footpath, ignoring every single sign I had posted. Then she hit the gas like she was qualifying for a desert rally. She sped through the trees like a heat-seeking missile. But what she didn't see, thanks to her oversized ego and those 2 big sunglasses, was the irrigation trench I had dug a few days earlier to redirect runoff from a rainstorm. Just a 2-foot rut, shallow but perfectly angled. At her speed, it might as well have been a launch pad. She hit it, her front wheels lifted. For 3 glorious physics-defying seconds, Karen and her ATV were airborne, like a lawn dart dipped in glitter. The machine rotated mid-air, her hair flying behind her like a majestic eagle caught in a wind tunnel. And then, splash! Water erupted like a geyser. Frogs leapt like Olympic athletes. My koi scattered like gamblers hearing sirens. Karen belly-flopped into my pond, the ATV landing sideways with a wet thunk that echoed down the block. It was over in an instant, but in my head I replayed it in slow motion, over and over. Her hair, the arc, the scream, The splash. It was poetry written in gasoline and bad decisions. She surfaced, flailing, coughing, absolutely drenched. Her designer jacket was soaked, her phone holster bubbling beneath the surface, and yet, true to Karen form, her first words were not of apology. "No," she pointed one algae-covered finger at me and shouted, "You set me up!" Apparently, in her mind, I had dug a 2-foot trench and waited like some kind of pond-dwelling Bond villain, hoping she would go full throttle and swan dive into my backyard koi habitat. Her friends, meanwhile, looked like they had just witnessed a drive-by baptism. Karen limped to the bank like a soggy villain in a melodrama, clutching her ankle and muttering about lawsuits, property sabotage, and emotional warfare. I went inside and came back with a towel for myself, because I was about to laugh so hard I needed to wipe my face. 15 minutes later, she had an ambulance on the way, a police report in the works, and a backup phone taking blurry photos of my hazardous landscaping. When the sheriff arrived, a good man named Bill, who'd been through 2 divorces and 3 decades of neighbor complaints, he just looked at me and asked, "You got footage?" I nodded and handed over the SD card from the trail cam. 2 hours later, the tow truck arrived. They winched the algae-coated ATV out of the pond like it was being rescued from a swamp team demolition derby. Karen stood by, snapping photos like she was documenting war crimes. The last thing I heard that day, as she limped back to her house wrapped in a beach towel and pride-drenched fury, was her voice screeching through the trees, "I'm calling my lawyer!" And that's when I knew, without a doubt, I'd be in court by Friday, because apparently you can sue a pond, or at least try. Karen lawyered up, naturally, of course she did. 1 week after her aquatic joyride turned koi pond belly flop, I received a thick manila envelope that smelled like cheap cologne in desperation. Inside, a lawsuit. The name on the letterhead, Darren Hollowell, Karen's ex-husband, and apparently her attorney. He was a legend in town, though not for his brilliance, more like a walking cautionary tale with a bar license. Darren was the kind of guy who handed out business cards at funerals and had once been caught using a courtroom bathroom to film law-themed motivational videos for YouTube. If sleaze had a scent, Darren wore it like cologne. Metaphorically speaking, he smelled like expired confidence. The lawsuit was a masterclass in absurdity. According to the complaint, I was guilty of malicious aquatic entrapment, hostile landscaping, and, my personal favorite, reckless topographical sabotage with intent to emotionally destabilize. She made it sound like I'd booby-trapped the terrain like a Bond villain with a gardening fetish. Karen also claimed the koi were aggressive, that the sudden visual disturbance of exotic fish contributed to her psychological breakdown. Somewhere, Sigmund Freud rolled over in his grave and muttered, "Even I can't fix this one." I needed backup. Enter Nena, local legend, part-time real estate attorney, full-time slayer of nonsense. Sharp eyes, sharper tongue. The kind of woman who could win a case before the opening argument by just raising one skeptical eyebrow. She read through the complaint in my living room while sipping black coffee from a mug that said, "I object to your nonsense." She didn't laugh. She didn't even blink. She just flipped the last page, looked at me and said, "She's trying to sue the laws of gravity." We got to work. First, she pulled the county records. The pond, fully permitted, inspected, approved. In fact, it had been on file longer than Karen's house had existed. Then we gathered receipts. HOA letters from before the incident, video logs of Karen tearing down my signs, Mitch's suspiciously timed citations. Metaphorically, we weren't building a defense, we were writing a demolition plan. And we were going to drop it like a mic. Meanwhile, Karen was busy launching a publicity tour from her own front yard. She posted selfies in a neck brace, videos with a fake limp, hashtags like pond trauma, justice for Karen, and yes, seriously, koi attack. She uploaded a heavily filtered TikTok video of herself standing beside the pond, tearfully explaining how her freedom had been stolen by a trench. It got 12 views, 2 of them were from her. Unfortunately for her, the internet has a nose for drama and a wicked sense of humor. The footage went viral, but not how she hoped. Someone edited it with banjo music and frog sound effects. Another added a slow-mo voiceover. This is what happens when entitlement meets topography. One user uploaded a remix titled "Karen Goes Koi Diving," complete with Olympic-style scorecards at the end. 8.5 from Canada, 2 from France, 10 from Florida. Rhetorically, she trended for the wrong reasons. But Karen wasn't done swinging. She called in her cousin Mitch, vice president of the HOA and her personal enabler. Within days, I received a notice in my mailbox, written in the formal tone of someone trying very hard to sound official, but mostly sounding like they wrote it in a panic between Taco Bell shifts. The list of violations was impressive in its creativity. Unauthorized koi turbulence, negligent water containment, unregulated aesthetic contrasts. I think that meant my pond was too pretty. He cited me for topographical manipulation, as if I'd been terraforming the backyard with a backhoe and a grudge. Metaphorically, they weaponized bylaws like medieval scrolls. And while Karen was still drying out from her pond plunge, Mitch was trying to drown me in fines. It was so transparent, even the HOA president, a woman named Denise with a permanent side eye, started raising eyebrows. But the retaliation wasn't the real problem. The real problem, they didn't know we had footage, not just my trail cam, but Carla's 4K masterpiece. Carla lived across the path. Sweet woman, birdwatcher, had a camera mounted on her back deck that streamed blue jays and squirrels to YouTube for local school kids. Turns out, the day of the Great Splashdown, Carla's camera had been on, not just on, rolling in full 4K Ultra HD. The angle was perfect, wide frame, perfect light, everything in shot. Karen revving her ATV like a NASCAR wannabe, her friends cheering her on, the engine screaming, and the quote, right before she launched over my trench, she yelled, "If I crash, I'm totally suing," and then she did, with confidence. The video caught her mid-air, ATV flying, arms spread like some kind of redneck angel before landing with a glorious splash. We had the nuke, and we hadn't even launched it yet. The courtroom smelled like old wood, nervous sweat, and cheap perfume, and not the good kind, more like courtroom cologne from a gas station clearance rack. Karen made her grand entrance 5 minutes late, wearing a neck brace so white it practically glowed. Dark sunglasses covered half her face like she was trying to dodge paparazzi that didn't exist. One arm was in a sling, the other clutched a massive binder labeled Exhibit K. Metaphorically speaking, she wore that neck brace like a crown of delusion. Her lawyer/ex-husband Darren slinked in behind her like a man who just realized he was on the wrong side of history but couldn't afford the Uber to switch lanes. As she limped dramatically toward the plaintiff's table, despite claiming an ankle injury last week, I could practically hear the theme music from a courtroom soap opera playing in her head. And me? I sat quietly next to Nena, my attorney, sipping from a water bottle like it was a bucket of popcorn. Rhetorically, would truth win or would drama scream louder? The judge, gravel-voiced, gavel-ready, called the courtroom to order. Then Nena stood, and when she did, it wasn't just a defense, it was an unleashing. She opened with the permits, pond approved, maintained, and documented. Next came the photos of the private property signs, 3 of them all clearly visible. She handed the judge a folder filled with HOA communications, most of which conveniently dated the same week Karen had splashed down. And then came the piece de resistance, Carla's 4K footage. The courtroom lights dimmed, and there it was, crystal clear. Karen, revving her ATV like a caffeinated NASCAR rookie. Karen, yelling, "Watch this." Karen airborne with majestic absurdity. And Karen crashing into the pond with the grace of a wounded pelican. The room went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop, or more accurately, a koi flick its tail in satisfaction. Nana didn't say much after that, just one line. She flew on her own wings of foolishness. Mic dropped. Then it was Karen's turn, and she took the stand like it was Broadway. She sobbed. She gasped. She adjusted her neck brace between every sentence. My client, Darren began, was the victim of an elaborate landscaping trap. Then Karen chimed in. She claimed the koi had startled her, that the water sparkled too aggressively, that she had been hypnotized by a lawn gnome with hostile energy. I waited for the moment she blamed sunspots or goat-based weather manipulation. I didn't have to wait long. I felt lured, she said, eyes glistening. Like the koi were planning it. Like the pond was watching me. Nena raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting the fish conspired to sabotage your ATV? Karen straightened, or tried to, and said, I'm saying the vibe was weaponized. Satire? Your Honor, Nena replied, deadpan. My client was apparently menaced by ornamental landscaping. The judge blinked, the bailiff coughed, the jury looked like they were trying not to laugh. Rhetorical question? Can ego suffer water damage? The judge leaned forward, folded her hands, and gave Karen the look only a judge could deliver, a look that said, I've heard everything, and none of it makes sense. This case, she said slowly, has been enlightening. Then she turned her attention to the pile of evidence we'd submitted, the footage, the signs, the fact that Karen had screamed, if I crash, I'm suing, before launching herself like a glitter-covered lawn dart into the pond. The gavel hit like thunder. This case is dismissed, the judge said, with prejudice. Translation, Karen couldn't refile, ever. Then came the twist. The judge ordered the HOA's actions to be reviewed. She issued a formal referral to the State Housing Board for misuse of authority. Cousin or not, she said, HOA positions are not above accountability. Karen didn't just lose, she drenched the whole system. The next morning, I found a cupcake on my porch, strawberry frosting, edible glitter, a toothpick flag sticking out of the top that read, Aunt, Karen, 0. By noon, I had 4 more. One came with a handmade card that said, thank you for protecting the koi and our sanity. Even Carla dropped by. She handed me a framed photo, a freeze frame from the 4K video. Karen, mid-air, arms flailing, eyes wide. The caption, airborne, baby. The community had spoken. The memes were back. T-shirts were printed. One kid made a pond-themed board game. Turns out, koi don't forget, and neither does a neighborhood that finally saw ego meet consequences and laughed all the way to justice. The emergency HOA meeting was called for 6:00 p.m. By 6:03, Mitch was already sweating through his collar. His cousin Karen was nowhere to be seen, but her ghost hovered in every meme, whisper, and eye roll in the room. Mitch tried to act like a statesman under siege, but he looked more like a kid caught cheating mid-spelling bee. He clutched the microphone with both hands like it was a lifebuoy in open water. Metaphorically, he clung to that mic like it would save his sinking ship. I called this meeting, Mitch began, voice cracking, to address the recent spread of misinformation targeting your HOA board, and to remind everyone that unity is built on rules and respect. That's when Carla stood up, calm, casual, sipping her thermos of tea like she was waiting for this exact moment. She tapped the mic twice, leaned in, and said, Didn't you approve the ATV rally? The room went silent. Mitch froze. Someone in the back coughed and then laughed. The floodgates opened, the neighbors erupted. Questions, accusations, confessions, it all poured out like overdue rain on scorched earth. One elderly man stood up and said, Karen once yelled at me for having tulips taller than regulation. A teenager shouted she stole our Halloween skeleton and said it promoted necromancy. Someone else said she fined my dog. By the end of the hour, a petition was circulating, a real one. By majority vote, Mitch was suspended pending review. The board was dissolved for reorganization. And the HOA newsletter? It quietly stopped publishing. The room emptied with the kind of joy reserved for weddings and tax refunds. Outside, kids ran through sprinklers while someone spray-chalked Launchpad 24 near the pond trail. And just like that, Karen became legend. Her fall had outpaced her fame. The video footage had gone viral again, this time remixed with banjo riffs, superhero music, and one version set entirely to Free Fallin' by Tom Petty. The kids in the neighborhood started reenacting the pond dive with a cardboard ATV and a trampoline. One 6-year-old yelled, "Airborne, baby!" before doing a cannonball into a kiddie pool. Some neighbors got a little creative. One printed lawn signs. Font 1, Karen 0. Watch this, Exhibit A. Another renamed the Google Map pin near my house, Karen's Launchpad. Fiction couldn't write her better. She wasn't just infamous, she was folklore now. But of course, Karen wasn't finished. She filed a formal harassment report against the internet. According to her handwritten complaint, and yes, it was handwritten, she had suffered digital assault by meme, emotional vandalism, and long-term karmic trolling. Metaphorically, she sued the internet for bad reviews. She tried to blame me for inciting community-way ridicule through subliminal aquatic messaging. Her lawyer, Darren, was smart enough not to sign the new complaint. She listed Twitter handles, TikTok usernames, even included a printout of a Reddit thread titled, Karen vs. the Koi, Fight of the Century. And then, in a delicious twist of irony, the FCC caught wind. Because her modified emergency repeater, from back when she was jamming Wi-Fi, had pinged a nearby EMS channel again. They flagged her again for potential interference. She was now on 2 federal watch lists, one for signal tampering and one for being extremely annoying. The county stepped in next. After reviewing Karen's lawsuit history, her HOA manipulation, and the circus she created, the district attorney opened a malicious litigation inquiry. The HOA, now leaderless and chaotic, was fined for procedural misconduct. Mitch was quietly removed from all positions of influence. His cousin's name now made people flinch. Rhetorically, they buried justice in forms. We dug it back out, with receipts. And then something beautiful happened. The new interim HOA, now composed of sane, unpaid volunteers, decided to host a community picnic. Where? By the pond. That's right. The same spot that had once been weaponized in lawsuits and late-night rants would now be the site of laughter, lemonade, and folding chairs. Inspired, I decided to renovate. The koi pond had survived Karen's crash, but it deserved better, a reward. I hired a couple local guys to expand the edge, reinforce the bank, and install a small solar fountain in the center. The water sparkled again. The frogs came back. The koi swam like they knew peace had returned. And then, one day, a neighbor delivered a package. Inside was a hand-sculpted ceramic figurine. It was Karen mid-ATV jump, mouth open, sunglasses flying, immortalized in glazed clay. The base read, Flight Risk. I placed it near the new bench by the water. Symbolically, it wasn't just funny. It was closure, a tribute to absurdity, a celebration of accountability, and a reminder that peace doesn't mean passivity. It means knowing your boundaries and defending them with coy, calm, and sometimes a ceramic joke on a pedestal. The first surprise didn't come with a knock. It came with a folder. A vanilla envelope waved quietly like a white flag as Karen stood at the edge of my property line, bundled in winter gear and humility. She didn't rant. She didn't even flinch when my neighbor's dog barked in her direction. She just held out the folder and said, I'm dropping everything. The lawsuits, the HOA, the police reports that read like poorly written soap operas. All of it, gone. She wanted what she called a mutual non-aggression agreement. No more court dates, no more digital war, just peace. It was like watching a movie villain suddenly realize they weren't the main character, just the subplot everyone skips. I nodded, took the papers, told her my lawyer would look it over. She left without another word. No sunglasses, no dramatic exit. Just boots crunching frost and the weight of too many bad decisions carried quietly for once. A week later, something even stranger happened. A man in a sharp blazer pulled up in front of my house in a black SUV. He wasn't from the county, not law enforcement, not HOA. He was a filmmaker. Paul Rivera, documentary producer, working on a series called Small Claims, Big Chaos. Apparently the Karen saga, complete with coy, court transcripts, and memes, had caught the attention of some viral legal drama forums. They wanted to film an episode titled Flight Risk, the Pond Lawsuit. He pitched it straight-faced, like it wasn't the most bizarre crossover since Sharknado met Judge Judy. Metaphorically, it was Tiger King, but with koi fish instead of big cats, and way fewer felonies. I said I'd think about it. Then he dropped the real kicker. You control the narrative. He wasn't there to mock me. He wanted to tell the story, the whole story, honestly and with a little humor. I agreed, on one condition: we do it by the pond. Word got out fast. Within days, the neighborhood was buzzing. Carla offered her 4K footage. Nina signed on for legal commentary. Even old Mr. Mendez from 3 doors down said, "If you need me to reenact the chair folding incident at the HOA meeting, I've still got the back brace." Filming started the following weekend. The crew interviewed everyone. They got my porch, the koi, even the ceramic ATV figurine that now sat proudly by the water's edge, like a porcelain monument to poetic justice. Neighbors recounted their favorite moments, from Karen's mid-air splashdown to her goat frequency sabotage accusations. One woman said, "I still have her flyer that said, 'Stop aquatic aggression.'" I framed it. And it wasn't just a comedy reel. The film explored how communities push back when control turns to abuse, how truth eventually floats, even if it takes a dramatic splash to get there. Then came the most unexpected email I've ever received. Subject line: "Saw the documentary." It was from Karen, no emojis. No legal threats, no cease and desist, just 2 short lines. "You could have made me look worse. You didn't. Thank you." I stared at it for a full minute. Not because I thought it was fake, but because, for once, it felt real. There was no blame, no spin. Just a rare moment of something resembling accountability, or maybe just exhaustion. Rhetorically, even villains crave a fair edit. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Sometimes closure is best delivered silently. That week I received a small, nondescript package with no return label. Inside, a plush goat, the same one from the other incident. It wore sunglasses and a tiny sash that said, "Long may you bleat." No note, no signature. Just a soft reminder of the chaos, the creativity, and the victory that came not from revenge, but from staying calm, documenting everything, and letting the absurdity burn itself out. It now sits on my bookshelf between a copy of the HOA bylaws and a coffee mug that says, "I survived pond court." Because sometimes restraint is its own kind of roar. And if you can laugh after the storm, you've already won. I added one final touch to the property, a new sign, simple, direct, unapologetic. No ATVs, no exceptions, no Karens. Neighbors noticed immediately. Someone added fairy lights. Someone else brought a handmade sticker that read, "The pond doesn't hold grudges, but the lawn does." It became a local landmark. Kids posed with it. Adults used it as a directional marker. Yeah, turn left at the Karen sign, then go past the koi, and every time I walked by, coffee in hand, I couldn't help but smile. Because it wasn't about winning anymore. It was about enduring, outwitting, and outlasting the chaos. One ridiculous chapter at a time. It's easy to scream. It's easy to rage. But winning doesn't come from who yells the loudest. It comes from who documents quietly. When Karen launched her ATV like a suburban missile, I didn't chase her with shouts or threats. I waited. I watched. I filed things. Quote to remember: facts hum louder than screams. Because while she was busy flinging pond scum and hashtags, I was collecting time-stamped receipts. She weaponized attention. I weaponized patience. And that, friends, is the first rule of neighborhood warfare. Stay calm, stay funny, stay legal, because rage burns fast, but a well-placed trail cam, that's forever. Here's the blueprint if you're ever caught in a HOA horror movie with someone like Karen at the wheel. Document everything. Videos, photos, timestamps. If it happened and no one filmed it, did it really happen? Know your property rights. Permits, local codes, boundary lines. That paperwork, it's your armor. Keep your cool. Judges don't like shouting. They like evidence. Metaphor? Paper trails are shark repellents in HOA waters. Because people like Karen, they bank on you reacting emotionally so they can play the victim. But when you walk in with a calm tone and a folder thicker than their ego, you win before the gavel even drops. So don't match chaos with chaos, match it with carbon copies, receipts, and maybe a lawyer named Nena who sharpens court filings like swords. After all the chaos, the neighborhood didn't rebuild with policies. We rebuilt with porch chairs and brownies. Because here's the real secret no HOA manual will ever admit. Muffins greater than micromanagement. You want fewer rule violations? Start with more kindness. Lead with respect, not regulation. Our post-Karen community did just that. The HOA was restructured. We swapped fines for flags, violations for potlucks, threats for themed bake-offs. One neighbor made koi-shaped cookies. Another donated pond plants in honor of the flight path. And suddenly the fences didn't feel so tall. The pond didn't feel so political. Rhetorical question: what wins? Fear or pie? Fear isolates, pie invites. That's how you build a real neighborhood, not through power, through connection. Let Karen be a cautionary tale. Let your home be a welcome sign. If you've ever tangled with a clipboard tyrant, you know the feeling. 1 minute you're trimming hedges, next minute you're being cited for non-regulation wind chimes. So here's what to do. Comment below with your own HOA horror story. Subscribe for more justice-driven suburban storytelling. Like if you've ever battled a neighbor who thought bylaws were battle plans. Because storytelling matters. These tales don't just entertain, they empower. They remind us that common sense, decency, and yes, even koi ponds still matter in a world spinning too fast. Final metaphor? Some heroes carry capes, others carry koi permits. And sometimes the greatest victory isn't revenge, it's sipping your coffee, watching your pond ripple, and knowing the paperwork is bulletproof. You didn't just win, you outlasted, you outwitted, you outbled Karen, and you did it without raising your voice.